There was in the place where we lived an unusual excitement.
Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Hey everybody, here's a throwback episode from our 2019 interview with Dan Vogel. He's a historian, and we're going to talk in this first part one. This is part of a 4-hour interview. I'm going to split it up into two parts. This is our discussion about the first vision, especially the Anachronisms and that sort of a thing. And then in part two, we're going to talk about the Book of Abraham, and I'll be posting that shortly as well. So anyway, I thought it would be fun to revisit this interview and talk about the first vision, especially with my recent interview with Sandra Tanner, where that was a big part of her loss of testimony back in 1960 or so. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Well, welcome to Gospel Tangents. I am really excited. I've got an awesome guest. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Dan Vogel. Welcome to Gospel Tangents.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, so we're all the way out here in Ohio, and, I have a question. It seems like I remember you were a California boy. How did you end up in Ohio?
Well, when I was about 34, I met my wife. She had a job opportunity in Chicago. We went there for 10 months. Then she got transferred here. Now she's a school teacher, public elementary school teacher here. And we decided to stay. And we've been in Ohio for about 26 years.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Now, can you give us a little bit more of your background? Tell us a little bit more about your California upbringing. Are you a California Mormon kind of a guy? Is that?
Well, my ancestors were converted in New York, actually, in the Liberty branch of New York.
So you've got pioneer ancestors?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that.
Warren Foote came across the plains. Warren Foote. That's how he got his name. No, I'm just a little joke, but. David Foote and Irene Lane were Warren Foote's parents, and David Foote converted, but Irene Lane did not. She was a good Methodist, and her brother was the famous George Lane, the minister that preached in Palmyra in 1824-25, in that revival that got Joe Smith excited about which church is true, although it's 1824-25 and not 20.
Okay.
So David got converted. He died in 1845 in Nauvoo and was buried there. And Irene converted about that same time. She held off. She did get converted.
She converted at his death, essentially? Is that what you're
Around that time. I can't remember if it's before or after. But she died shortly after that, and she was buried in the Nauvoo cemetery also. Warren Foote was a captain of 50 or 100, I can't remember which, but he came across the plains, and he actually became a school teacher, and he kind of delayed his conversion also. But he did get converted in Nauvoo, I think it was. And they were in Kirtland for a while and saw the mummies and the papyri and the temple. They took a tour of that and saw the mummies there. And then he was assigned to the Muddy Mission in southern Utah near St. George. And he was a school teacher.
That's what it was called, the Muddy Mission?
Yeah. I can't remember why.
Wow.
I think it's a name of some geographic thing, but his diaries, he's got real nice writing. He's somewhat educated because he's a school teacher, writes well and great penmanship, better than mine. And then his son, George Albert Foote, named after George Albert Smith, the church historian. Mm-hmm. And he ended up in Farron, Utah, raising horses. And then when he retired, he got older, he lived in Salt Lake, just a couple of blocks from Temple Square, actually. My grandma, Arvilla Vogel, she was in about 11 sisters and one brother. And her sister and my grandma were maids in a rich Mormon family's mansion somewhere. I forget what the names of these guys were, but they moved to L.A., and my grandmother and her sister went with them. And there she met my grandfather, who was a non-Mormon, but had just got out of fighting in World War I in France. He was a twin. They're from Pennsylvania Dutch, Vogel. And the other brother was Oliver and Wilbert. Wilbert was my grandfather. Oliver got killed in France. And then, so my grandfather, he joined. He was a smoker. He tried to quit smoking, but failed.
There's a lot to.
Yeah. So, anyway, he died. He eventually became a Los Angeles fireman in these old fire trucks. You know, the hoses and the old fire trucks, antique looking, fire trucks. And he got injured in a fire and subsequently died about a week later when my dad was 8. And my grandfather's name is on, all these monuments for LA and California, Sacramento, California, on the monuments there as a firefighter that died. So he was pretty much of a hero in a way.
That's cool. So are you like a California surfer dude, or where did you go?
My brother was the surfer with the long hair, and I had somewhat long hair when I was a teenager, before my mission. So I just hung out on the beach. I didn't surf. So, but I did go to the beach a lot, and graduated from high school, went to junior college, then transferred from the junior college to California State University at Long Beach.
Okay.
And got a...
They're the gauchos, right?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I can't tell you. I never went to any of those kind of games or anything.
That's too bad. I'm a big sports fan.
I'm just a humanities guy. I majored in history and took a lot of psychology classes. I didn't get a minor in psychology because I didn't want to do the statistics class.
Oh, see, I teach statistics.
So I'm not a math guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started out. I did start out at pre-law. Went to philosophy, and then ended up in history because I liked that better. Okay. So I kind of tried to blend it with the history of ideas. Intellectual history really is. I like to know how things start and how they kind of develop. So most of my historical classes were the beginning of English history, the beginning of Russian history, the beginning of, Western civilization and all that kind of stuff. So I got enough courses in the liberal arts and social sciences so I could credential in teaching at a high school level anyway, social sciences.
So that was your idea, was to just become a high school teacher? Yeah,
but I really liked researching and writing on early Mormon history. Ever since I was about 16, I've been going on it pretty hard.
Oh, wow.
And, before my mission, I had read all the standard works. I had practically all the inspired version, all the changes underlined in it. From reading Bruce R. McConkie's New Testament commentary. Nice. When I read those 3 volumes as a teenager.
You were a McConkie Mormon then?
Yes.
Wow.
And he came to my mission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he came to my
where
mission.
Where did you
go? Birmingham, England.
Nice.
Yeah. And he came to my mission. He was one of my heroes because he was a scriptorian. I was kind of a scriptorian myself. As a kid, I was really gung-ho on going to seminary, and raising my hand. I know that. So I was very annoying.
This is early morning seminary, I guess. Not like
Oh,
Utah.
yeah.
I
used to
feel
get
bad for you people outside of Utah that don't have release time seminary. It's too early for me.
Oh, well, the teacher that taught the class volunteered to pick me up and take me, and so I'd have to go extra early.
Oh.
Even like 5 o'clock in the morning. I used to get up in high school and go with the teacher.
That's tough, man. Did you take a nap while you were waiting for seminary to start?
When I was young, I didn't need to.
Oh, okay.
I had lots of energy. Nowadays, I take a nap. I have to take a nap. Yeah. I get up at 4 in the morning on days I work, and only work like 3 days part-time. But the rest of the time, I'm in my office here. I get up with my wife when she goes to work at 6 o'clock. So.
Oh. And you take a nap later in the day.
Yeah, definitely. Whether I want to or not.
Well, great. So you served a mission in England. So were you still a McConaughey Mormon on your mission then?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I was pretty green, pretty naive about my Mormon history at that stage in my life. I read Joseph Fielding Smith, Answers to Gospel Questions. I read all those volumes. I had journal discourses when I was a teenager on my shelf, and my parents had books. I read their books. They're the ones that actually had the Joseph Fielding Smith books. Mm-hmm. And I would go to Deseret. I would save my money, go to Deseret Book in the city of Orange in California, and buy books. I'd buy Bible commentaries also, because there was a Deseret Book, and then near there was a Christian bookstore, and I would go there and get Bible commentaries. And on my mission, I was reading these commentaries. I would buy commentaries in England, even in Bible dictionaries, and be reading through all of those. On my mission, I started becoming a little more sophisticated. I was meeting ministers, and I love to debate ministers and, do scriptural chasing with them. I enjoyed
that too, actually.
Well, it broke up the monotony of getting doors slammed in your face.
Right.
But, and that was stimulating and, interesting to hear their versions. Mm-hmm. They weren't too sophisticated on Mormons. There was one, a Reverend Cuthbert, who was an Elam Pentecostal minister, who had come to Salt Lake and met the Tanners, and he had the Tanners' materials in his office.
Oh, okay.
And he introduced me to them, although I had no idea who they were.
Right.
He goes, "You don't know the Tanners?" No, I don't know who the Tanners are. I've never heard of them. And they're in Salt Lake, and they print, old documents and old books. Even professors at BYU buy their stuff, and they have this modern microfilm company that's near the baseball field.
Right.
So my friend and I, this first summer after we got back from our mission.
Can I ask what year this is, or is that?
Oh, that's okay. So I went on my mission in December of 74. So 76. This would be the summer of 77, probably.
Okay.
And we went there to see some old missionary companions. Mm-hmm. While we were there, I go, let's find this modern microfilm company, because he said it was right above their door,
Which is now Utah Lighthouse Ministries.
Yeah, right. Utah Lighthouse Ministry now. So I went around Salt Lake. I had no idea where anything was except Temple Square. And so I'd ask people, where's the baseball field? And they would go down here, go down there. So I found the baseball field.
It's on 13th South. I go there all the time still.
Okay, I still don't know. I have to have people take me there. But I drove around the baseball field until I saw the house with modern microfilm above the door. So I went in. Sandra was there in the living room, and their stuff, their books were around, and I was looking at them. I bought there, I go, what's your major stuff? Shadow of Reality, Case Against Mormonism. I bought those. And then my friend drove home, and I read all the way. And I go, there's got to be answers to this stuff. So, and I was working through it. And eventually I go, well, I got interested in the first vision, and I got a hold of Wes Walters. We wrote back and forth a few times. I got a hold of Mike Marquardt on the Book of Abraham. Was one of my issues, and I was doing research. And while I was doing research at BYU on the first vision, Milton Backman came in, and I started talking to him.
So you just went to BYU on your own?
On my own. The next summer,
okay.
Every summer I went to BYU and I did research on my vacations.
Part of education week or something, or no?
No, just on my own.
On your own.
On my vacation.
Wow, that's a weird vacation for a 20-year-old, right?
That's the way it was. Well, I was just really interested in Mormon history.
Wow.
Even as a believer. But one of my phases was that, I'm still a believer, but I have to admit that Wes Walters has a good case on there not being a revival in 1820 in Palmyra, which no one really, even now, disputes. They might dispute what that means, but they don't dispute that there wasn't a revival, But there's also, the issue of the revival Joseph Smith describes exactly fits the one of 1824-25. So I would argue that he moved it back for a reason. And you have to pay, we'll get to that, but you have to pay attention to the why did he move it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So
is it safe to say that you're a convert of Sandra Tanner then? Is that
No. Their stuff really didn't, it got me going in that direction.
Okay.
A more serious, historical analysis. So they were, okay.
Were they a catalyst?
Put it this way, evangelicals, more or less it's a Bible interpretation, a war of interpretations, and it really doesn't go very far. And back then, especially, when they would talk about Mormons and, being satanic or whatever, had no effect on me whatsoever. So, but the Tanners were more historical based. And then there was the Dr. Clandestine came out, and there were some interesting ideas there back and forth. And so that starts you down the road. And so I went I was a history major in the university, and I learned tools there. I also learned tools from reading Bible scholars and their methods of analyzing literature, the Old and New Testaments in a with literary tools and like rhetorical criticism or form criticism, source criticism, those kind of things. And you learn those, and I was starting to apply those methods to the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price. So, and it opens up a whole different avenue of inquiry, So I would say learning those methods in the university is what probably gave me the tools to finally figure things out for myself.
Okay. So right before we turned on the camera, we were talking a little bit about, would you consider yourself to be a critic or an apologist, or where do you fit on that scale?
Well, I'd definitely be in the critic camp. I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing if you're an honest critic. Mm-hmm. Just the same thing if you're an honest apologist. So there's not really that much. They're not really that far apart.
The critic and the apologist aren't that far apart?
No, we're not really. Not in my mind.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, a believer, in my view, even though Mormons have this tradition, I know, and they say this a lot, they still don't really know, and there a lot of members maybe quietly struggle with doubt if they're honest with themselves, and so it's not really that far. And a lot of them acknowledge that there's issues that can't be easily answered. So, and they decide to believe anyway. Fine with me.
Well, and we talked about the term pious fraud, and I liked what you said about that. Tell me about pious fraud, because that's your opinion. You think Joseph was a pious fraud.
I'm trying to find, as a non-believer now, the most charitable view of Joseph Smith a non-believer can have. Okay? So, if you're not going to believe Joseph Smith's revelations and that he had actual contact with God, or, this is the same question you have with any religious tradition. How do you view Joseph Smith and be a non-believer? Do you just think, oh, he's just lying, and the whole thing's a fraud, and he's just a con man trying to get money? What a lot of extreme critics of Joseph Smith say, he's trying to get power, money, sex. Mm-hmm. And I say, I don't believe that. I believe that he used the deception. If you don't believe the Book of Mormon's actual history, but it could be inspired by Joseph Smith's definition of what is inspired, then you have to believe that he used a little deception to sell that revelation, that he had a revelation and it's inspired, but he has to sell it to other people to make it as hard for them to reject his revelation as possible, right? Because he learned how to do that as a treasure digger. And he's using this skill as a confidence, to build confidence, to make people believe his revelations. So I see Joseph Smith as an inspired pseudepigraphist. Like the Assumption of Moses, the Ascension of Isaiah, the Book of Enoch. These are pseudepigraphic works written by anonymous people trying to smuggle new doctrines into the Christian tradition by writing in the name of a dead prophet. These are writings that are supposedly lost and rediscovered. So I believe Joseph Smith is doing a similar thing with the Book of Mormon. He's writing Pseudepigrapha, and but he believes he's inspired. He knows there's no Lehi and Nephi and all that stuff, but he believes that this is the method of teaching true doctrine. So like he said, you can get closer to God through the Book of Mormon than any other book. He really believes that. So, and he's trying to correct false doctrine. He's combating the deists, the non-believers in his day. He's trying to shore up the Bible, which is being criticized by deists and skeptics of his day because of problems that they see in the Bible, or incompleteness, and their sectarian strife over what the Bible says. He's trying to calm that down. He's trying to make people believe that otherwise may not believe. But he's also trying to garner for himself power to found a New Jerusalem government and try to correct what's going wrong in America with Jackson becoming president. He's a Mason. Masonic.
Jackson's a Mason.
Andrew Jackson, President Andrew. He was elected in 1828. He's inaugurated just, right when, in 1829, when Joseph was starting to dictate the Book of Mormon to Elder Cowdery in April 1829. So the United States is going in the wrong direction, and he's trying to stop that. And the fastest way he knows how, because he believes there's only a short time until Jesus returns. He's also trying to get his father to repent. There's a lot of things going on. So the story's quite complex, and it's huge, and it's to me, very fascinating. And ICM as a pious fraud is a term where he's using deception to produce a greater good. And this idea of doing that, using deception to produce the greater good, is defended multiple times in his own scriptures. Like D&C 19 dictated in March of 1830, the month the Book of Mormon came off the press. And it's kind of dictated to Martin Harris to tell him to finance the Book of Mormon. And in there it says that it is written eternal punishment, everlasting punishment. But it doesn't mean that there's no end to this punishment, because it's really synonyms for God's punishment. Everlasting punishment is really God's punishment. Eternal punishment is really God's punishment. So it says, "Behold, I, God, have suffered these things for all, that they might not suffer if they would repent. But if they would not repent, they must suffer even as I." So you go to a temporary hell, basically, is what it's saying. And so what Mormon is at this point in 1830, Joseph Smith is revealing in this revelation that says, don't publish this revelation, because people will use it as an excuse. It's revealing that Joseph Smith is privately a universalist, that he doesn't believe in eternal punishment. So for a universalist to use deception, has a way out of, the fear of God's punishment for using deception. But I believe he feels like he's inspired to use deception, that he has God's okay, that he prayed about it, got an answer, that, okay, you can do this. It's okay. He prayed about it. He worked it out in his mind, what he should do to further God's mission. He worked it out, and he prayed about it, and he got a burning in the bosom. That's his revelation. That's how he does everything. That's how I believe he dictated the Book of Mormon. He told you this is how he did it. That's how he did it. He worked it out, the stories out in his mind. He got a burning in his bosom, and he dictated that part. And, he worked out large chunks probably. So there's Nephi cutting Laban's head off, and he hesitates. Nephi hesitates to cut Laban's head off. The Spirit commands him to cut it. He goes, I haven't ever disobeyed the commandments. I can't do that. And the Spirit says, it was better that one man perished than the whole nation perish in unbelief. So Nephi obeys the command. See, so he was commanded to break the commandment. And I believe Joseph Smith had that same hesitation. He resisted for a while, 4 years. And he finally gave in.
4 years to find. That's why the angel kept coming back every year, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't think the angel came back every year. Okay. I think that's added to connect the story, the 1823 story, and 1824. He went in 1824 to get it. He failed because he couldn't bring Alvin. And that was the end. And then in 1827, he was thinking about it again. And he got the go-ahead. But he told the story that every year he went to connect the first story to 1827.
All right. Well,
so there's a continuity.
Let's jump into the first vision in just a minute, because we're almost there. But the other point that I thought was really interesting that you said was, so in your mind, this idea of a pious fraud is a a generous word for a non-believer. But on the one hand, you said it ticks off the really anti-Mormons, and it ticks off the pious people.
Yeah.
Explain that.
So if you're a moderate, it doesn't matter if it's this subject or any subject, you're a moderate, you're going to get hit from both traffic going both ways. And
so you consider yourself a moderate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm moderate. That's my basic temperament. So I gravitate to a moderate position and compromise. But so if I say Pious, some extreme critics of Joseph Smith who thinks he's just a child molester and a womanizer and had no redeeming qualities whatsoever, just comment, that's the beginning and the end of the whole matter. They'll get mad because I'll say Joseph Smith was pious. I don't say, Joseph Smith said he was not a righteous man himself. Okay. So, but his act was meant to be pious, especially in the beginning when he got started. Now, as time went on, it got a little more complicated, and power corrupts. Absolutely. So it corrupted Joseph Smith too. So,
so the anti-Mormons don't like you because...
and the anti-Mormons say, when I say he's pious and that he got revelations, and the Book of Mormon defines what inspiration is. It says, Moroni 7, chapter 7, says that you can know the truth of these things because they do good. That the devil would not do good, would not want anyone to repent or believe in Jesus. So since this book commands to do good and to believe in Jesus, it has to be good because all good comes from God. And that's his definition of what's inspired. And so by that definition, even though he dictated it himself, and he knew there weren't any Nephites or any gold plates, there were no Nephites, no ancient Nephite to appear to him, to give him gold plates. There were no gold plates. He made the gold plates out of tin, and people could feel them through the cloth or see him in a vision. He used that to increase faith. And I liken it to a faith healer. Faith healers. And they're not all frauds. Some of them are out and out frauds. But there's some that use deception. They know that they're using hypnotism or the power of suggestion, doing little tricks with people with the falling power. They suggest people fall and they fall. They know that's all the power of suggestion. They use other tricks, out and out fraud tricks. But then people start coming up that throw down their crutches and walk or say they have no pain and things like that. And these faith healers justify using the deception to raise the level of faith so that the real miracles can occur. And when the real miracles start occurring, then the faith healer interprets that as God approving of the method.
Okay.
So I say that when Joseph Smith started getting more and more converts, it worked. His father repented especially. That was one of his main goals. And it worked. People got converted. They believed that weren't necessarily believing, and they were living better lives. This was all justification for using the method. But he believed he was a real prophet, that he was inspired in a general way, and doing a good work. And because he was doing a good work, he could not have been evil.
Interesting. And then the Orthodox don't like you because you say he's a fraud.
Yeah, they don't like that word fraud or deception. Whereas, we humans lie. That's one of the major attributes of being human. And we lie to children. We lie to people to get the greater good or not to hurt people's feelings or, so Joseph Smith is using deception, but he believes he's doing a good work, and then it's, promoting God's mission on earth.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's jump into the first vision narratives a little bit. So I think most, at least Orthodox people, are familiar with the narrative in Joseph Smith history, the 1838 version, but there are at least 3 other versions before that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the 1838, I call it 1838 account, even though we don't have an 1838 account. We have an 1839 account, which was copied from the 1838 account that we no longer have. So I call it the 1838 account because he's actually dictating it in Missouri in April 27th, I think it is, 1838. And he's in the midst of all this persecution and in Missouri, and he starts dictating his history, the early part of his history. And this is actually the 3rd account that we have of this first vision. It's actually, if you count it, the 4th.
Yeah, I was thinking it was the 4th, so I was surprised you said.
Well, if you count the Articles and Covenants of the Church, which I'll save that. But the first one's 1832 account, and then there's the 1835, November 1835 to Robert Matthews account. And then it's the 3rd account. And the counts after that are all derivative of this 1838 account, really. So the various versions of this same account. So the 2 main accounts to focus on really is the 1832 and 1838.
Okay.
Because they're both really, one's Joseph Smith is really involved in the 1832 account, and he's really involved with the 1838 account.
Yeah, and so I think most people are very familiar with the 1838 account because it's in our Pearl of Great Price, and most of us have read it many, many times. So let's talk a little bit. So you said that you spoke with Wes Walters. Can you give us a little bit more background on that? Because apparently there's a misdating 1820 versus 1824. Okay,
so the 1830, unlike the 1832 account, which mentions nothing about a revival, okay, the 1838 account mentions this revival in great detail. I mean, when the first vision is only a few hundred words. The revival account and what happens after the persecution he receives for telling his vision adds up to like 3,000 words. So there's a disproportion.
So you're saying that the 1832 account is very short and the 1838 account is very long. Is that what
well,
you're
the
saying?
1832 account is short, but so is the 1838 account. Both of them are short when it talks about the vision
itself.
Yeah. But in the 1838 account, he spends a lot of time talking about the revival and sectarian strife and the aftermath of being persecuted for telling his vision. This takes up the vision itself in the 1838 account is only a few hundred words, whereas the rest that builds up to it and afterwards is 3,000 words. He spends a lot more time talking about his feelings leading up to it because he really wants people to connect. And the persecution afterwards is very pertinent to his present circumstances in 1838, where his followers are being persecuted, and he's trying to get them to identify with the story.
Okay. So tell us more about this 1832 account. Okay. Is it easy to find? Is it in Joseph Smith papers or something like that?
So it was originally written in by Frederick G. Williams and Joseph Smith's own handwriting.
Okay.
In the letter book around the summer of 1832. And then the book becomes a letter book. So then it was cut out. Then it was in the Joseph Fielding Smith's safe for a while. There's rumors about it. Chessman, what's his first name? Chessman talked about it in his thesis, quoted parts of it about that there was only one personage that appeared was the noticeable thing that got that versus 2 personages in the 1838 account, or the 1835 has 2 personages also. But the 1835 is a transition. But there's a reason for the 1832 account having one person, Jesus. A lot of people try to smuggle in the Father by playing with the wording, because it says, "And the Lord opened the heavens, and then I saw the Lord." So they go, oh, it's the Father opened the heavens, and then he saw the Lord. And then this Lord says, "Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee. I am the Lord of glory. I am Jesus Christ who was crucified for the world." So, it was Jesus that appeared. Now, a lot of people assume, because of the 1838 account, that the 1838 account says 2 personages descended in a conduit of light, standing above me in the air, This was a heavenly vision. 1832 account opened the heavens and he saw the Lord. There's no Lord coming down. He's looking into heaven still. People assume that, Jesus came down. There's just one person there. No, it was a heavenly vision. The Lord opened the heavens, and I saw the Lord, okay? And he spoke unto me, okay? So this was a heavenly vision, and this was totally consistent with what revivalists, people that participate in the revivals, experienced. Although there are some people that do see Jesus on the right hand of God, kind of a thing. And you got to remember, too, Joseph Smith is dictating the 1832 account. Just several months earlier, he and Signe Rigdon saw the 3 degrees of glory, and they saw Jesus on the right hand of God in a heavenly vision too. So, but the question is, to me, why does Joseph Smith all of a sudden want to talk about seeing Jesus in 1832, in his 1832 history? And why is he writing the 1832 history? Why? What made him start writing this history? So, before I tell you about that, I will go to the Articles and Covenants. Okay, so in the Articles and Covenants, mentions in the preamble to the D&C 20, in the preamble to the Articles and Covenants, it talks about Joseph Smith repented of his sins. Here it says, truly it was manifested unto the first elder, Joseph Smith, that he had received a remission of his sins. He was entangled again in the vanities of the world. But after truly repenting, God ministered unto him by a holy angel, and that would be Moroni. So the point of this, the Articles and Covenants, is that Joseph Smith received a remission of his sins. It was a manifestation. It doesn't say what kind, how it was manifested. A lot of people try to read into that. Oh, yeah, that's the first vision. Just like, and they try to put 1838 into there. But that's not what historians don't handle documents that way. Because people reading this don't have the 1838 account. And you can't assume that there's not a development, that there was this full-blown thing, 1838, that's what happened, and Joseph Smith is just giving hints, and, can't do that. Or else there's no history,
So let me ask a question here, because I believe I've heard this before, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Methodists a lot of times had these similar sorts of visions of Jesus. And so in one sense, Joseph's vision was not unusual.
No.
Can you talk a little bit more about those Methodist experiences?
Well, yeah, people at the revivals, especially Methodist ones, would get in religious enthusiasm, as they called it. They would get all excited, and some people would have heavenly visions. Some people would see Jesus. A lot of ministers at the time, forget about the revivals, a lot of ministers at the time when they wrote their autobiographies, would write about their conversion story, and it would include seeing Jesus. Or some, let's say, experience with deity in some form. A born-again type experience. This is what I would suggest that Joseph Smith really had. We'll eventually get to that. And that the story evolved over time. So I'm unlike Wesley Walters, unlike a lot of critics.
Wesley Walters is a critic. Let's talk about, and isn't he a Methodist, if I remember right?
Well, he was a Presbyterian minister. Presbyterian minister, and when he found out there was no 1820 revival, he admitted that you can't prove that a vision didn't take place, because that's an inward experience, and it's not open to historical analysis, but I say it is. You can't say whether Joseph Smith didn't have a real experience of some kind, but you can say that story evolved, so you can make a case for that. So that which is what I do. I don't deny that Joseph Smith had an experience in 1820 or 21. The 1832 account says it was in 1821. In his 16th year, when he was 15. The 1838 account says in his 15th year when he was 14. Which becomes important when I try to reconstruct what may have actually happened. The core story that evolved over time for different audiences and different purposes. So the 1832 account is more concerned with Joseph Smith repenting of his sins. And this is where it conflicts with the 1838 account. The 1838 account, he doesn't know which church is true. There's a revival. He's confused over which church to join. So he goes to pray to see which church to join. The Father and Son appear, tell him that they're all creeds are an abomination in his sight, to join none of them. The 1832 account has Joseph Smith concluding that all the churches are false at the age of 12. And like his parents, Lucy and Joseph Smith Sr. had both made the same conclusion, that all the churches were false, but it wasn't tied to they didn't have authority. They were just corrupted by the traditions of men. No one's thinking of, they don't have priesthood authority, because Christians didn't think that way. Catholics did. But Protestants didn't think of, we have authority and the Catholics don't, or whatever. Protestants got their authority to baptize, let's say, because the Bible commanded that you be baptized. And that is the authority, the commandment coming from the Bible. Whereas Joseph Smith said, no, it has to come from Revelation. So when the angel commands to baptize, or you got a revelation through the stone to baptize, that is a new revelation, and that is the new authority. So he has current authority, current revelation. That is the original concept of authority before there were any stories of angelic ordinations. But in the 1832 account, Joseph Smith is told, Joseph Smith has already concluded there's no church. So when he goes to pray, he's not asking which church is true. He's asking, how am I going to be saved? There's no true church. They're all apostate. And what am I to do? And Jesus appears and says, basically confirms his belief that the world lieth under sin and all that, and says that those who believe on my name shall be saved. So it's very close to a revival experience. You have faith in Jesus and you're saved.
Almost a born-again kind of an experience?
That's what I say.
Yeah.
That's what I say is, if you take Jesus out of it, it will be a born-again experience.
Okay.
So, why does he have to see Jesus?
You think he basically in 1820 or 21 did have a born-again experience?
Yes.
Okay.
His father, Joseph Smith Sr., was a universalist, okay? And he was probably also a Unitarian because they were one and the same at that time. There are very few people actually separated those two things. They're so close that later in the 19th century, Unitarians and Universalists joined. And the texts at the time by Unitarians were Universalists. So, a Unitarian doesn't believe that Jesus is God. He's the Son of God, the same as anyone else can become the Son of God. He's a manifestation of God to show us a perfect example kind of a thing. But he's not God himself. And they're two different people. There's the God the Father, and then there's the Son, not a God. Okay? So, and that's why the Book of Mormon is so preoccupied against universalism and occupied with obeying the commandments, and that Jesus is the very eternal God.
And this is because Joseph Sr. was a Universalist.
Yeah. And so my take on this is that in 1820 or 21, whenever it happened, he got converted to Jesus. And he liked Methodism.
Okay. And had a Methodist vision experience.
Born-again experience. Yeah. A born-again experience. However, after the church was organized, he needed to have a vision of Jesus before the church was organized in order to be an apostle.
So you don't think he saw Jesus in 1820?
No, I don't.
It was just
it was just a born-again experience.
Born-again experience, okay.
And I justify that with a little literary criticism of the Book of Mormon, because I believe there's parts of it are autobiographical. And so I would argue that Mormon, in the Book of Mormon, Mormon's the editor of the Book of Mormon. I mean, he's basically Joseph Smith, editing and commenting on other prophets. So in the Book of Mormon, he actually introduces himself in 3rd Nephi as an apostle of Jesus Christ. But Joseph Smith doesn't really get the connection between seeing Jesus and being an apostle. Okay, William E. McClellan or whatever, he didn't know about the first vision. Well, actually, a lot of members didn't either, because it hadn't been. Joseph Smith didn't publish the 1832 account. He published the 1838 account in 1842, and McClellan was gone. So he must have missed the first vision, because later in years he said, well, how could Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery be apostles at the foundation of the church when they never claimed to have seen Jesus?
What year is this?
When McClellan said that? Yeah. Oh, about 1870s.
Oh, it was way after.
Way after, yeah. Okay. So, the point is that even when Oliver Cowdery, when the Quorum of the 12 was organized in February 1835, Cowdery said, your ordinations won't be complete until you see Jesus. So that had become the distinguishing feature of being in the Quorum of 12. So in 1832, the 1832 account has Joseph Smith seeing Jesus. This would be the first time that we know of that he said anything, because the Articles and Covenants didn't say anything.
Yeah, up until then it had only been Moroni, right?
Only Moroni, yes. People, when you started to talk about the the significance of Joseph Smith's church, it's always started with Moroni and revealing of the plates. The interesting thing also is that the 1832 account ends with Oliver Cowdery coming and becoming a scribe for Joseph Smith in April of 1829. And it says that Cowdery had come to Joseph Smith because the Lord had appeared to him, to Oliver, and showed him the plates. Probably in a dream. I think that's what it means. So both Joseph and Oliver in the 1832 account see Jesus before the founding of the church. Okay. So I think that's one of the motivations there. The other motivation for the 1832 account is that it starts with announcing Joseph Smith's why he's the leader of the church, basically, because he's because of the manifestation, receiving a remission of his sins, and then the angel appearing to him, and then having the lesser or the holy priesthood. It's called the holy priesthood through the ministering of angels, which you shouldn't assume that means John the Baptist, because the ministering of angels is Moroni. So through the ministering of angels, he receives the holy priesthood. Then the revelation of the high priesthood in June 1831. And so it kind of gives his authority. And the reason why I think it's preoccupied with authority and giving the same rundown as a preamble of the Articles and Covenants, basically, is because he's just returned from Missouri. And in Missouri, Bishop Edward Partridge has given him a hard time about authority. So there's a challenge to Joseph Smith's overall authority over the whole church. So I think the 1832 account was begun as a response to challenges to Joseph Smith's leadership, sole leadership. Bishop Edward Partridge thought he was the leader of the Missouri church, and was giving Joseph Smith a hard time, and Signor Rigdon had to reprimand Edward Partridge. And that's a whole story in itself.
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't mean to. This brings up another thought, because I had a chat with Michael Marquardt, and actually Michael Quinn as well, because I believe Quinn has 3 different dates for the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood: 1829, 1830, and 1831. Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea as to when the Melchizedek priesthood was restored? Because it sounds like it's related here to this first vision.
Yeah, so the Melchizedek priesthood, that term, Melchizedek priesthood, gets a little murky, because in June 1831, it says that with the high priesthood, for the first time, the Melchizedek priesthood was revealed. So
in 1831.
Yeah, June 1831. For the first time, when he's revealing the high priesthood. Now, the Peter, James, and John story is a fiction. It never happened. What happened was the first authority to baptize came through the stone, according to Lucy Smith, in 15th of May, 1829, on the day that they baptized one another. And the command was the authority. Nothing about ordination, laying on of hands of angels and things like that. So all this ordination by angels comes in 1834 and 1835. But before that, the concept of authority was the command through the stone, through the angel, through revelation. The command was authority. And so the first one was the baptism. That was authority. The second one was in the chamber of David Whitmer's father's house, where the voice of the Lord in the chamber of Peter Whitmer's house D&C 128, I believe it is a letter, 1842 letter of Joseph Smith calling back on various revelations and visions, and he mentions that. And the history of the church mentions it also. So the command in the chamber to ordain one another elders, and that was all. They were made elders. Then, and the eldership was associated with apostleship. It was a different concept of apostle that would come in 1835. So then the next one is the high priesthood in June 1831. Then in September of 1834 is when Oliver Cowdery writes a letter to the Missouri Church, to W.W. Phelps, and tells them that an angel appeared on the day that they baptized, he and Joseph Smith baptized one another. The angel is unnamed, ordained them together to have the authority to baptize.
Who we now know as John the Baptist. Is that right?
You're right. And Joseph Smith names the angel. So Cowdery has no name. It's an angel. Gives them the authority to baptize. Then in 1835, in the early part of 1835, up to probably August of 1835, they're preparing to publish the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, which is released in September of 1835. Well, Joseph Smith expands earlier revelations, very key revelations, especially on priesthood. And in section 27, or section 27 now, which was originally given in I believe it's September 4th, according to the Book of Commandments, September 4th, 1830, in Harmony, Pennsylvania, when their Newell Knight is visiting Joseph and Emma Smith. They're going to get wine for the sacrament. The revelation comes and says that you don't have to use wine, especially from your enemies. And Joseph Smith expands that and adds a bunch of poetic kind of, you shall drink the wine in the kingdom with Moroni, and it names, and then with John, whom I have sent, and ordained you. And then it mentions Peter, James, and John, whom I've sent, who has given you the keys of the apostleship. So Peter, James, and John, it gives no date for this appearance. This is the first mention.
So this is 1835?
1835, somewhere probably in March or April, I would say, because that's the date the Joseph Smith papers have given for expansions to D&C 107. So
107 is where Peter, James, and John.
No, 107 is that expands the 1831 revelation on making the president of the Joseph Smith president of the high priesthood, and which is over the bishop. So that was expanded to talk about two priesthoods,
okay,
and
so
some other things.
It sounds to me like you're making a pretty strong case for the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood being 1831, which really wasn't known about until 1835. Is that what
1835? Yeah. So it was. So the June 1831 conference, or say Alma, chapter 13, talks about the high priesthood and associates the high priesthood with Melchizedek. So in June 1831, it's the high priesthood that is given to elders. And for a time, it was elders with more authority. It wasn't a separate office at first. takes several months before it becomes the high priest office. But it was elders that had the high priesthood. And that high priesthood, of course, because of Alma, is going to be associated with Melchizedek. And that's why it says for the first time. The eldership wasn't associated with Melchizedek. So in the church, you had, for a while, elders. Elders were the charismatic leaders of the church. And the teachers, priests, and deacons were under the elders.
Yeah, so from what I understand, I spoke with Greg Prince about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said was, when the church was very first organized, you had elders, priests, and teachers. Those are the only three offices.
Right. Deacon came a little later.
Deacon and bishop came when Sidney Rigdon was baptized, and he said Bible has bishop and deacon, and so those were added later, both to the Aaronic priesthood. But it sounds like at least
there's no Aaronic.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, so it was just the priesthood. Okay. But we now, I mean, it sounds like, and I'm trying to remember, because Quinn also delves into this, and it sounded like elders were kind of like, we're not sure if they're Aaronic or Melchizedek, because it was kind of confusing.
Elders and then the high priests were separate. Not until the expansion of D&C 107 were elders included with the high priesthood in the high priesthood, and formed two layers.
Okay.
The lesser. Now, the lesser is really what tripped up a lot of people outside the church, because that you were supposed to be an actual, Levite to have the lesser priesthood. Right. And that was supposed to be done away with. But Joseph Smith kind of puts in his revelation a justification for it by saying that until Elijah comes, the sons of Levi can offer an offering in righteousness. He quotes that, puts that in John the Baptist's mouth, actually, later, and that justifies, it's supposed to still be here until Elijah comes. So that was like an apologetic built in.
You're talking about D&C 13.
D&C 13, yeah.
Okay.
Which is out of Joseph Smith's history.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm following you there. So when was D&C 13 received? It's not a section, really. It's just taken out the wording when Joseph Smith says, this is what John the Baptist said. That was just taken out of the history and put in D&C 13. Okay, what year was that, approximately? 1835?
I don't... No, it wasn't.
Earlier than that?
No, D&C 13 is like probably 1876.
Oh, really? Is that late?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up.
Okay. So let me make sure I'm clear. So what you're saying is the authority was really nebulous. That's probably a good way to say it.
It was David Whitmer said, we called it authority, we didn't call it priesthood.
Okay.
And when you get the high priesthood, then the term priesthood gets introduced, really, in June 1831.
Okay, so in June 1831, we have a high priesthood. We're now pulling elders into this high priesthood, along with high priests.
That wasn't until 1835.
Oh, okay, well, this is confusing.
Yeah, it is very. Mormonism takes so many turns, and this is the reason why is 1835 is such a pivotal year. This is where Joseph Smith is rewriting these revelations. He's refurbishing, he's expanding a lot of priesthood revelations and reconceptualizing it. He's also introducing the patriarchal priesthood. And so this is a very important period.
Okay.
And it gets very tricky.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying, I'm going to try to pull all this back together. 1820-21, Joseph had some sort of an experience which you believe was not a vision.
He born again.
A born again experience in 1820-21.
Yeah.
There was a revival in 1824, it sounds like.
So 1823 does tell the story of the angel, or a treasure guardian.
Okay.
guarding
For the
the
gold
plates on the hill Cumorah, which is like the third hill he's actually dug on and didn't get anything in his neighborhood. So there's that. The plates, he's supposed to go back the next year. He goes back the next year, doesn't bring the plates home, and says he couldn't get the plates because he was supposed to bring Alvin. And Alvin had died between that time.
Okay.
And so he couldn't get the plates. And that was the end of that story. Then he went back to money digging. And he gets arrested and tried in South Bainbridge in March 1826. And then he gets a little discouraged about money digging there. And then he comes back. He comes back to the area and works for Joseph Knight Sr. and marries Emma in January 1827.
Okay.
Then he takes her home to Manchester to live with his parents. And while he's there, he comes home and announces that the angel or the messenger has reprimanded him for not getting the plates. So September 22nd, he goes up on the hill at night
With Emma,
I guess, in the carriage at the bottom of the hill, and says that he has removed the plates but hid them in a log, Then he finally he gets warned that there's people trying to find the plates. He goes and takes them out of the log, brings them home, hides them in a trunk, locks the key. That was the instructions. And they eventually moved back to Harmony, Pennsylvania. That's another long story. Then Martin Harris comes down in February 1828. The 116 pages those Book of Lehi get dictated. And Martin Harris takes him home because the baby, 1828, June, the first baby, which they named Alvin, is born. And Harris takes the manuscript back to Palmyra to show his wife and others, and loses them. They get stolen. Lucy Harris probably burnt them. Then Joseph Smith has to start over. Then Oliver Cowdery comes into the neighborhood and starts teaching school. But when the school lets out in April 5th, he arrives in Harmony with Samuel Smith because he's heard about the plates and wants to help. And they go down there. And so in April, 1829.
Okay.
And then they start dictating the Book of Mormon, beginning with Mosiah. They can just continue to the end from Mosiah.
Mosiah like 2 or 3, I think. It was early in the book, wasn't it? Or 4, maybe? Do you remember?
No, it's what we have. So Mosiah...
Mosiah 1?
Yeah. Mosiah begins abruptly.
Yeah.
You can tell when you read Mosiah, the first part is missing because there's no superscript like on all the other books.
Okay.
And it begins abruptly because the words of Mormon, that bridge, the words of Mormon, about 13 verses at the end of that words of Mormon tries to catch the reader up to why the book of Mosiah begins abruptly, which is really strange from as if you tried to reconstruct that from Mormon's point of view, if he was a real person, how we would know exactly what part in Mosiah would be missing becomes a problem. But which is really hairy when you really try to work out
Well, I know
the bridge.
Don Bradley's got a book on the Lost Book of Lehi, so I'm looking forward to that.
I haven't seen it, but
he says it's 116 pages.
Okay. Well, that's another story, and nobody knows how long the manuscript really was.
Right.
116 is where the Joseph Smith's replacement text ends. So I think that's where he got the number. So he goes. He dictates.
So April is when they start.
April
translating.
5th is when Culver Cowdery arrived, and April 7th is when they began.
Okay.
So they began on April 7th, and they worked until probably about the end of May. Nobody knows exactly when David Whitmer came and picked them up.
Well, in between, though, because didn't they come across a scripture about the waters of Mormon and said, well, should we be baptized? And so that's when the angel came?
No, Albert Cowdery said that when they were, when Joe Smith was dictating 3rd Nephi.
Oh, so they'd already gotten to 3rd Nephi.
Yeah, after they had dictated that part, it dawned on them that they needed baptism, and they went to pray about it, about this baptism, because it's now the New Testament period in the Book of Mormon, and Jesus is giving the authority verbally, to Nephi and the other 12 disciples to baptize, the Nephites. So that's when, that coincides with that period of time, and you can divide up how fast they were going. And so, that would be May 15th. So then about the end of May, beginning of June, is they were probably at the end of the Book of Mormon, and we're thinking about how do they replace the beginning? What do they do? Do they retranslate it again? Or, the answer actually comes and tells them to not do the same over again because the enemies would alter the text, which is not possible. But
Mark Hoffman could have done it.
And well, the handwriting would be different. It's all handwritten. But May is the date that the Book of Commandments gives to D&C 10, which is the instruction to do the small plates.
Okay.
Instead of doing the large plates over again. Mormon's abridgment go to the Nephi's original record, which happened to include a summary of the Lost Book of Lehi in the beginning of his record. But so then they go to Fayette, and they start at the beginning, First Nephi, and go up to the Omni and the Words of Mormon in the month of June. So
1829.
1829.
Okay.
Then during June is when supposedly Joe Smith receives the revelation, the voice of the Lord in the chamber of Peter Whitmer's home. And they ordain each other elders. The history of the church says they delayed doing it until the church was organized. But David Whitmer says it was done then, and this is what partially confused him about where the organization of the church took place.
Oh yeah, because we talked with Michael in Fayette or Manchester.
Right. So David Whitmer always talks, there was a bunch of elders already and stuff like that. And David Whitmer is actually thinking of the June 1830, the first conference of the church. He thinks that's the organization in his memory. But that's why he gets it all messed up. So you're saying that, we can't really trust David Whitmer's memory? No, well, it's as faulty as anyone else's memory after so many years.
Yeah.
He isn't trying to pull a fast one.
No, I understand, yeah.
So, I believe that he was confused about where the church was organized because he's confusing the church organization with the first church conference in June 1830.
Which was in where?
Fayette,
okay.
in his father's house.
Right.
So he's confusing it with the year before.
So you're with Michael Marquardt and saying it's in Manchester.
It's in Manchester. The history of the church is the people who compiled it were confused too, because when they first wrote it down, they put the first conference as the organization of the church, and they had to cross it all out and write another version, and then come back and repeat it when they got to the June 1830 conference in Fayette. So they thought the first conference was the organization of the church. Now, the church says there were 6 people or 6 members of the church. Mm-hmm. It's only saying there were 6 baptisms before that. In the narrative, up to that point, there were 6 baptisms. There could have been more. So it's only saying that there were 6 baptisms. It doesn't mean that they were all there around the table and Joseph Smith formally organizing it. Doesn't mean that at all.
So there were probably more than 6 people there on...
No. Joseph Knight Sr. was there. Oliver Cowdery, Joseph Smith. It was formally organized with 6 members in it. You know what I mean? Not there. Because Joseph Knight Sr.'s there. He hasn't been baptized yet. Okay. But Joseph Knight Sr. writes in his history that he was there, and he describes the revelations.
And do we know who these 6 people were?
Yeah, I don't know if I can name it. It's Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery are the first 2.
Okay.
Samuel Smith, Hiram Smith.
Parents, Lucy and Joseph? Senior? Or no? Because I thought he was...
They might be the ones, because...
I thought they were very excited.
Yeah.
Joseph was very excited his father would baptized.
And I think that is on that day.
So it's all family members and Oliver.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's how it goes.
5 and...
I think you're right.
There was a Rockwell, too. A Rockwell.
The mother.
She was related to Porter somehow.
His mother.
Porter's mother.
Yeah. But it says Lucy and Mrs. Rockwell, I forget her name, were baptized the day after. But Joseph Smith Sr. on the day.
Okay.
But there were baptisms, which is one of Mike Marquardt's arguments, that they didn't rush back to have these baptisms in Manchester. Because the people were there, saw these baptisms on that day. So it could have been Lucy, and I think maybe the rough draft was mistaken about the day.
Okay, well that's interesting.
So there were baptisms on April 6th, and there's revelations that date Manchester April 6th. Some people try to question that as a mistake, but I don't think they're successful in arguing that.
Why do you think, because it seems like the church with the Joseph Smith papers has continued on with April 6th in Fayette, and they haven't changed it to Manchester? I know they're really big on accuracy. Do you have a reason why? Or?
Well, because the history of the church says Fayette. People, some historians they're so stuck on that, the 1838 account giving Fayette, that they can't move off of that for some reason. But, the official history, 1838 history, is not necessarily, some...
accurate.
In every detail, because there's different hands being involved. There could be a reason they wanted to make it Fayette instead of Manchester, because they wanted it to have this big, conference thing, when actually it was kind of quiet and not all that exciting.
All right.
Anyway,
okay.
so many issues with the history.
I know.
So we've got the word of the Lord in June 1829. Then Joseph Smith, the church is organized on April 6th in Manchester,
right?
As Mike Marquardt and others, a lot of people
I know
argue, because there's too much evidence.
Well, there's some Community of Christ people that believe it's Manchester too, right?
Yeah, I believe they do. They're less. The Community of Christ are less tied to the official history.
I have to tell you, I was really surprised when I posted that interview with Michael, how much pushback I got on that, especially from faithful Mormons, because I didn't think it was a big deal. Like, oh, I got the place wrong, big deal. But some people were like, no, that's a bad source. You can't trust Michael. And I was just like,
no. Mike McKay wrote a little book, right? Michael McKay.
Okay.
Wrote a little book on where the church was organized, and he has a theory in there to try to get around the documentary evidence.
Okay.
The revelations primarily, because there's revelations given in Manchester on April 6th, and there's like 3, and they're dated that way in the manuscripts and Book of Commandments, but there's a little loophole they try to exploit that I don't think they're successful. I plan on doing a video on it eventually. But, I mean, they have some good points to make about why Mike Marquardt gave reasons that might not pan out, but still the documentary evidence is pretty strong.
For Manchester.
Especially for the baptisms being there, Joseph Knight Sr. being there. Sorry for the phone. I forgot to unplug that one. So then we have Joe Smith in January or early February moving to Kirtland, Ohio, 1831. Then the following June is at a conference is when the high priesthood was introduced. So then we have that. Then 1835 is when he expands the revelations and adds angelic ordinations. So the angelic ordinations are first introduced, and think about it. The Articles and Covenants do not mention angelic ordinations. That would have been the time to mention it if you were ever going to mention it at all.
Now remind me about the Articles and Covenants. That was a precursor to the Doctrine and Covenants, right?
That was D&C 20.
The Articles and Covenants was just D&C 20? That's all it was?
That becomes D&C 20. So
the whole Articles and Covenants is just D&C 20?
Yeah.
Oh.
They call it the Articles and Covenants because it contains the outlines of what we believe. So the preamble to it goes through Joseph Smith's story, the angel and the plates, and it touched on the first vision, whatever it was. He received a remission of sins. Mm-hmm. The angel comes later. The plates, the translation, things that they believe. Then elders do this, priests do this, teachers do this. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a little mini
handbook of instructions, I've heard it called.
Yeah, well, that, or, the manual of discipline, kind of a thing. So it's the authority by which the church functions. And why doesn't it mention angelic ordinations? If this is the authority we have, and they're naming the authority on which the church is founded, doesn't mention anything about angels coming. And why did they have to be all added later? Joseph Smith inserts them into Revelations when he publishes the Doctrine and Covenants in 1835. So that changed the whole view. I mean, David Whitmer, who's the president of the Missouri Church, and William E. McLellan, who was an apostle himself, they said they heard nothing about angelic ordinations until 1834 or 5, which is the time when the documents show that the story came out. So why the angelic ordinations at the time? So my take on that is that it's harder to challenge Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery when they say that the angels ordained them and they ordained others. So there's a chain of ordinations. It's harder to break that chain and say, oh, I'm getting my own revelations over here. I'm going to break off, say Bishop Edward Partridge.
Or Hiram Page, maybe?
Well, at that period, there was no angelic ordinations or authority. The authority came through the stone.
Right.
And Hiram Page had a stone,
right,
which was Joseph Smith's way to handle that was, it's from Satan, and they destroyed the stone in the Revelations. So Hiram Page would have been a usurper to Joseph Smith's position. At first, Joseph Smith was an elder just like all the other elders. He was the first elder, Albert Cowdery the second. There was a third, fourth, fifth, whatever. It wasn't all that special, only that Joseph Smith, they were following Joseph Smith's revelations. But other people got revelations too. And they didn't have this view that a lot of, that current Mormons have, that Joseph Smith's revelations have been put into a book and they have become part of a canon. They are the authority and the standard by which everyone's measured by. That didn't exist. That didn't exist at the time. People were getting revelations and visions on their own. Joseph Smith got his. Some of them didn't pan out. Some of them were false, like the one to Canada. Some apologists might nuance that, make it's conditional or whatever. Not in the eyes of David Whitmer and the others. It didn't pan out. It didn't prove true. They didn't sell the copyright. There was a problem. And so...
The copyright for the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, the copyright for the Book of Mormon, selling the Book of Mormon copyright in Canada. So some of Joseph Smith's revelations worked out, some of them didn't. And some other people had revelations that did pan out sometimes, And the early church could be summed up in... somebody said, do you believe Joseph Smith, a prophet and all that? And the answer was, insofar as it is consistent with the Bible. So they weren't all, enthralled with Joseph Smith and his revelation. Joseph Smith had to struggle with him and try to prove his charisma. That's the nature of charisma, is that you have to keep proving it. Eventually, this is where I get into the sociologist Max Weber, a German sociologist who wrote sociological works on from charisma to institution. And he tried to show the transition from charismatic groups, and in order to survive, because charisma is very volatile, because anybody can get a revelation and challenge the leader. How does he maintain his leadership? And over time, it has to transition to the charisma of office. So now I'm the president. Well, Joseph Smith wasn't president of the church until November of 1831. President of the high priesthood. The actual president of the church really doesn't come until even later than that. So that transition is what I like to take apart. Mike Quinn has done that in his Origins of Power. Mm-hmm. Greg Prince was the first, really, to pave the way of looking at things that way.
Okay. So, all right. So we're through the muddled authority thing.
Yeah.
We're into 1835. Now, you also mentioned there was another account in 1835, First Vision account in 1835. How does this relate with this priesthood vision of Peter, James, and John? Or are they just completely separate?
Oh, it doesn't relate to Peter, James, and John. The 1835, November 1835 account is written in Joseph Smith's journal by Warren Parrish. And it's an account that Joseph Smith is giving to Robert Matthews, a very eccentric religious guy who gets revelations himself and is like a vagabond traveling around. And Joseph Smith tells his story, but he says that two personages appeared. One appeared, and then one that looked just like the other one appeared and stood next to the other one. But he doesn't say that it's the Father and Son. At least that's not what Warren Parrish wrote, in the diary, in the account. But it says, and he also saw angels. So it's a transitional thing. And so he sees Jesus, and the reason why he only sees Jesus at this time
In 1835?
in 1832.
Oh, in 1832.
In the 1832 account, he only sees Jesus. And why in 1835 he can see two personages is that the Book of Mormon, there's only one God, Jesus. And Jesus is both the Father and the Son. And it's a version of modalism or Sabellianism, where in Mosiah 15, it says that the Father is the Spirit and the Son is the flesh. That Jesus is both the Father according to the Spirit and the Son according to the flesh. And that the Son comes down, literally. I mean, the Father comes down and becomes the Son. Jesus is the very eternal Father. I mean, in Nephi 11, 1 Nephi 11, in Nephi's vision of the Virgin Mary, Mary, it says in the original version, in the first edition, Mary is the mother of God. And in 1837, Joseph Smith changed that to Mary is the mother of the Son of God. And there's several places like that. And that view is consistent with one God. Alma says there's one. How many gods are there? One. A lot of Mormons work really hard to try to harmonize that with later teachings. But it's pretty clear in these passages that God condescends, comes down on earth. The Book of Mormon is written to prove that Jesus is God, the very eternal God of heaven and an earth. The Father and the Son says that many times. So there's just Jesus appearing, consistent with that. But as time is going on, Joseph Smith's theology is developing to make a distinction between the Father and Son. And the lectures on faith, the fifth lecture, and the lectures on faith talk about God. God is a personage of Spirit. The Son is a personage of tabernacle. The Holy Spirit is the mind that connects them. So it doesn't say the Son is a tabernacle and a personage of Spirit. God is just a personage of Spirit. I mean, that kind of goes against what Joseph taught in Nauvoo even. Mm-hmm. Just a personage of Spirit. Just a personage of flesh. And the flesh has a will too. I mean, Mosiah talks about that Jesus' will was swallowed up in the will of the Father, because there's a will of the flesh also. So, and the mind, the Holy Spirit connects the two. It makes the tabernacle alive, basically. So, anyway, so there, in the Joseph Smith's theology is starting to evolve to separate the Father and Son and become more rationalistic.
Because the Book of Mormon is very, I want to say Trinitarian, and I know there's different versions of the Trinity, such as modalism and things like that. Right. So what you're saying here, if I'm, just want to make sure we're understanding, Book of Mormon is very Trinitarian. I'm just going to use that word. And then Joseph later moves into more of a Godhead theology. I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So once he starts developing to Binitarianism.
Binitarianism?
The lectures on faith are Binitarian.
No, see, that sounds like it should be my thing. I should be teaching Binitarianism.
It's still a version of modalism, the lectures on faith. But it's more Binitarian because there's two.
Well, let's talk a little bit about modalism, just because I know that a lot of, I'm horrible with the Trinity, and a lot of Mormons are horrible with the Trinity, and we believe in actually modalism, that Jesus and God are the same thing. Isn't that essentially what modalism is?
Modalism It's also called Passionism, meaning the Father was on the cross, the Passion, which is a heresy, according to conventional Christians or traditional Christians. That's a heresy. The Trinity is not rational. Okay, they're one and they're separate and all that. And Joseph Smith was trying to rationalize it. And when you try to rationalize it, and if you stop anybody on the street, a Christian, and you ask them to describe the Trinity, a lot of times they're going to end up describing modalism. So, because if they're not really attuned to theology, they're going to mess it up. Okay.
But modalism is Jesus and God are the same thing. Is that in a nutshell?
The Father comes down and becomes the Son.
Okay.
And he could still pray to the Father, on earth and stuff. But a modalist would interpret that praying to the Father in a different way, that he's praying just out there, not to specific, not to himself or whatever. But, and the Mormons would say, oh no, that means that they're separate. Jesus wouldn't pray to himself. He's praying to the Father. That proves that they're separate. And that's how they would interpret, the passage about Jesus being baptized and the Holy Ghost descending down and the Father speaking out of heaven and all that. All of that, with the rational mind, there's three separate people there. But in a theological frame of mind, rationality doesn't matter. They're still one, because you don't want three gods. That's a heresy.
Yeah. We don't want to be called a polytheist.
Right.
Right.
So that's three gods. You can't say that they're separate gods. There's three gods. That's a heresy. There's only one God.
Because early Christians were accused of being polytheistic before they...
No, but the question is, did the early Christians think Jesus was God? I don't think so.
I don't either.
I think it's later theology makes Jesus into a God. But so there are probably a lot of Christians. I probably lost them there. But so
we'll have the Christians comment and say how we got it wrong.
But just to say that, so in Joseph Smith's tradition, the Trinitarians were debating among themselves, and there were modalists all around Joseph Smith. He wasn't the only modalist. They're all around. They're called the Christian Connection in his day. And this Reverend Millard wrote a book explaining modalism, basically. So then there were the strict theologians, the strict Trinitarians. There were the Unitarians over here. They're separate, and that's a rational way to look at the Trinity. But Jesus is not God, so we don't have two gods. Don't call this polytheistic, right? So they're all debating, and Joseph Smith is in that swirl. And so when he evolves from the Book of Mormon is very rational. And he's trying to tell his dad, about his view of the Godhead, that Jesus is God, right? But there's only one God because the Father has come down and become the Son. That's his rational solution.
Okay.
So he's kind of trying to explain it in a rational way. And then he keeps evolving along that line. But he's still within his culture in this evolution. He's not all that alone in evolving where there's three separate gods, rational, kind of a thing. So that's why we got to see Joseph Smith is evolving as he goes in. He's getting revelations, and he's updating his revelations, through updating the revelations and rewriting his own history to add the Father. So if he's adding paragraphs to earlier revelations, why would he hesitate in adding the Father in the vision? He wouldn't.
Right.
Because he doesn't care about those details. He's using these, I believe.
You're talking about the 1832 account. Is that right?
Yeah, from the 1832 to 1835, there's two people.
Okay. So
how those two people figure, they both look the same. They're mirror images of each other. But how he viewed that is not so clear from the description. Even the 1838 account, you don't know really. There's two personages, but is it God the Spirit, like in the Lectures on Faith, and God the flesh, and Jesus, the tabernacle, there? You know, is that how he views that when he's dictating that? You can't take the Nauvoo period where God has a body of flesh and bones, you know, and the Son also. You can't take that and read it into this, you know. So, anyway, that's why 1832, Jesus. Why in the meantime, what happened to make it in 1838? There's another issue. Why? In the 1832 account, he's already concluded that all the churches are false. In 1838, he hasn't. He's praying to ask which church is true. Those contradict each other. You can try to harmonize them like Richard Anderson tried by just making a general description so general of each thing that they look the same. But they are diametrically opposed. Why does it change? So, my view on that is that in 1820 or 21, he has concluded all churches are false. He has a born-again experience. But the revival he describes, where his mother is proselyted to the Presbyterian Church, he says, I was at this time in my 15th year. My father's family were proselyted to the Presbyterian faith, and 4 of them joined that church, namely my mother Lucy, my brothers Hiram and Samuel Harrison, and my sister Sophronia. That's part of his 1820 thing, but we know that didn't happen in 1820. We know that they joined in 1824 and 25 revival, because Lucy in her own history says it was after Alvin's death. After Alvin died, she was grieving, and she wanted to have religious community, and she went. And they went, and actually, the Presbyterian minister at the time, Reverend Stockton, preached Alvin's funeral sermon and implied that Alvin had gone to hell because he hadn't been baptized. Joseph Smith Sr. got angry at that, incensed, and refused going anymore. And Joseph Smith's family was split. And Lucy, like a good convert, is trying to get other people in the family converted. She's hounding people. And 3 of her older children do join. Joseph Smith is caught between his parents. He's ambivalent. He doesn't want to join a church. He said he was more in tune with Methodism anyway, probably because of the emotional appeal it has. And Presbyterianism is a little more conservative and is of the quietist tradition, they call it, where the Spirit comes on you and you're quiet and, peace.
Is that what's happened to Mormons? We've become Presbyterians?
Yeah. Yeah. You became the church of Hiram Smith.
I just had somebody email me about the speaking in tongues thing, and why don't we have that in the church anymore? And I says, well, the Bickertonites do. You have to join them, I guess. Yeah.
So they were very charismatic, so much that Joseph Smith had to rein that in somewhat. And it eventually died. Became more that quietist tradition, whereas the shout tradition over here is like Methodists and Baptists. The early Mormons would shock each other. The current Mormons, the early Mormons, just would have 2 different kinds of meetings. So, anyway, what was I talking about? So the Smith family was split, and Joseph Smith is ambivalent. And for the first time, he's probably wondering which church is true. Is it the Presbyterian? Is it the Methodist? He can't join because if he joins, he's going to upset his mother. If he joins the Presbyterian Church, he's going to upset his father. And so another thing that raised the level of discourse in the Smith family probably was, okay, Lucy, this is what Joseph Smith Sr. is thinking probably. You joined the Presbyterian Ministers Church that said Alvin had gone to hell. Did he? Did he go to hell? What do you say? You know, what is it? You know? And so choosing a church would lose Alvin. And that price was pretty high. And it's not by any accident that Joseph Smith saves Alvin several different ways in the course of his development. In Mosiah, those who without the law shall be saved. Infants who die in infancy will be saved. Right there in King Benjamin's speech. Some people think King Benjamin in his sermon is more of a civil discourse, you know, a discourse pertaining to service to government in a way, and not just religious. That Benjamin Stockton is King Benjamin, and in Joseph Smith's remake of Stockton, where he has this King Benjamin save Alvin and infants who die in infancy, unlike what the real Benjamin Stockton was preaching. So he saves Alvin right off. Later, he introduces baptism for the dead. In 1836, he sees Alvin in celestial kingdom and wonders how he got there. And they were judged by the desires of their heart. That's another way.
Let's make sure that we're on the same page. So we've talked about the 1832 first vision experience, 1835, where we've got two, 1838, which is what everybody's familiar with. And I thought there was a fourth one. Is there a fourth one? And then you said there's 9.
There's 9 accounts, but the 9 are versions of the 1838 account.
Okay.
With 2 people, 2 personages, and just various different details that only really matter if you're writing a history of the first vision, which I am doing.
In summary, I didn't know that. Is that a new book? Is that your new book coming out?
Well, the book I'm working on now is Joseph Smith's life from 1831 to 1839. Okay. So Ohio and Missouri. So it's the 3rd volume that will be added to the Smith Pettit or Signature Books trilogy on Joseph Smith's life.
We haven't talked about your books yet. So, and I know you've got a fun. I really enjoyed your Mormonism Unveiled edition. I read all of your footnotes. I thought they were fantastic. But tell us about. We'll take a quick break here from the first vision because I know you got your Joseph Smith book. Tell us a little bit about that.
The biography of the first part of his life, which came...
what's it called?
The Making of a Prophet. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to portray how Joseph Smith transitioned from money digger or, treasure seeker to prophet. Mm-hmm. And so that's all it covers up to 1831 until he goes to Ohio. But I go through the Book of Mormon in detail because I believe it's autobiographical in nature, a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I believe Joseph Smith wrote it, it's all from his biography in some form or another. So I would offer various interpretations in the Book of Mormon to see if it coincided with his life. And I find the story of Lehi's journey from Jerusalem to the Promised Land of America similar to the Smith family dynamics. But on the first vision, though, I find that Mormon he gives a little biography when he gets to his book. And he says that I was, and I, Mormon, being 15 years of age and being somewhat of a sober mind, therefore I was visited of the Lord and tasted and knew of the goodness of Jesus. That's like in the first chapter of the Book of Mormon, in the Book of Mormon. What makes this really intriguing is not that it's the same date as the 1832 account for Joseph Smith having his experience with deity. But if you go through Mormon's biography that he gives surrounding that statement, he says he's 15, but he said both were named after their fathers, both Mormon and Joseph Smith. Both were large in stature. Both moved with their fathers from the North Country to a land southward about the age of 10 or 11, from Vermont to New York to Palmyra. Both their moves were followed by a war with the Lamanite Indians and a period of peace. Andrew Jackson's army defeated the Seminoles in 1817-18. Both lived in a time of apostasy. So Mormon goes on and on about how there's no miracles, there's no apostles, miracles have ceased, and it's an era of apostasy. Both had a remarkable manifestation of Jesus at age 15. Both lived in a time where Gadianton robbers, or secret combinations, slippery treasures, and magic were prevalent. And Mormon uses, talks about slippery treasures, talks about Gadianton robbers and secret combinations, and he even mentions magic.
Who are the Gadianton robbers in
the Book of Mormon? In the Book of Mormon. The Masons.
The Masons.
Yeah, the Masons. And Andrew Jackson was a Mason. Okay. And they feared Andrew Jackson's party, the conservatives, in Western New York. Thurlow Weed up in Rochester had an anti-Masonic newspaper, and he was the first person Joseph Smith approached to publish the Book of Mormon. Thurlow Weed went in 1828 election, went on and on about Andrew Jackson being in this secret combination.
Well, George Washington was a Mason. Why is that a big deal?
George Washington was a Mason. There were Masons around. They became not so well liked in 1826.
Because of the murder? Because
of the murder of William Morgan, who in Batavia, New York, who was like 30 miles away from Palmyra. And he was exposing Masonic secret oaths, ceremony, signs, secret words, secret signs. He was publishing them when he disappeared and was suspected to have been murdered by the Masons. That started an anti-Masonic movement. There was always an anti-Masonic movement because people were suspicious of any kind of secret organization in an open society, free and democratic society. And there was always suspicion. They linked him with the Illuminati in France, and the Illuminati were suspected of being instigators of the French Revolution, and so it was a fear that the same thing would happen here. And Thomas Jefferson, when he ran for president in 1800, he was accused of being a part of the Illuminati, and the ministers preached from the pulpit against the Illuminati. And so a similar thing was put out in 1828 when Andrew Jackson was running for president. And it really was most effective in Western New York, where William Morgan had been murdered. So there were all these posters. They're very interesting. The Masonic Party in politics. That was Andrew Jackson. The Masonic Party in politics. And they feared that a Masonic king, because they had kings, worshipful kings in the Masonic ceremony, and they feared that Andrew Jackson was one of these Masonic kings being put at the head of the government. And in Ether, the Book of Ether, there's Moroni warns that when you shall see these things, these secret combinations get above you, more or less, he says the end is near. So that he's writing these things, these warnings, so that you won't let these things get above you. But it's too late. Andrew Jackson's got elected. And that is one of the things Joseph Smith's trying to combat, in my mind. Yeah, and so
that's funny because he later embraces Masonry in Nauvoo.
He later embraces it. His church also becomes very Catholic-like. So he does evolve. My take on that is that when he begins, he's very young, youthful, idealistic. He's people that don't have very much power want to overturn it, the status quo. As he gets older, just like anyone else, and gets power and things he doesn't want to lose, he starts becoming more and more conservative in his views. He even says things about, the Catholics have got this part right, and things like that in Nauvoo. But so when he needs secrecy, especially around polygamy, about his secret marriages, starting in 1842 in Nauvoo, he wants to bind people to secrecy. And the most harsh binding thing he knows are these oaths of Masonry. And to me, it's just a natural fit. Anyway, so both Mormon and Joseph Smith were instructed to go to a hill and remove the record, and then Mormon was to engrave on it. Joseph Smith was to translate it. Mormon was about 24 years of age, which corresponds to 1830 when Joseph Smith published the Book of Mormon. So what does it mean for when it says Mormon at age 15 being so of a sober mind? That's Joseph Smith's view of himself too. Therefore, I was visited. What is it? What is visited of the Lord and tasted anew the goodness of Jesus? What is that? So, there's many other scriptures I could bring to bear on this, like Hebrews uses that term tasted. Those who have fallen away, had once tasted and fallen away, can't not be renewed again. But Alma says it in Alma 36, that one. Alma 36 is when he's converted, the story of his conversion from being a damned soul to being tasting of the goodness of Jesus in a way. He says, many have been born of God and have tasted, and as I have tasted. So, what is it? And Alma talks about the Spirit coming upon him, and that he basically has a born again experience. So, I believe this is an example of an autobiographical part of the Book of Mormon, and that this is probably the core, the kernel of Joseph Smith's first vision, or 1820-21 encounter with deity that evolves when he uses this to become an apostle, to justify himself, calling himself in all regarded an apostle. And that the story evolves just like he did his revelations. Okay. So that I think that pretty well says it for the first vision.
Okay, so in summary, we've got an 1832 account, 1835 account, 1838. Those are the three main versions.
Those are the ones that are probably the most important. The ones that come after that.
The other six are just
it would be Orson Pratt, Remarkable Visions. Basically, a few details different. The Wentworth letter, John Wentworth, the editor of the New York newspaper, it's basically from Orson Pratt. Then Orson Hyde in a German publication. You have to translate it, which Dean Jesse was one of the first to publish a translation of it. Then there's one of the ones is the German dentist guy in Nauvoo, blanking on his Niebuhr. Niebuhr, whatever. He adds a few details that are quite kind of interesting, where Joseph says in the revival he couldn't sing or shout with the others, which is an important key. Also on the revival itself, which I forgot. So Wesley Walters came out in the late 60s and was saying that he could find no evidence of a revival, which got everybody focused on trying to prove, Joseph Smith could have seen great multitudes converts uniting to the churches in faraway places as 15 to 15 miles away. Milton Bachman made a map with this circle on it showing where revivals were taking place around Joseph Smith's region. And it all came down to the meaning of words. There was in the place where we lived an unusual excitement on the subject of religion. It commenced with the Methodists, but soon became general among all the sects in that region of country. Indeed, the whole district of country seemed affected by it, and great multitudes united themselves to the different religious parties, which created no small stir and division amongst the people, priest contending against priest and convert against convert, so that all their good feelings one for another, if they ever had any, were entirely lost in a strife of words and a contest about opinions. So, Mormon apologists, Milton Bachman, Stephen Harper, some others, would focus on the region of country, that it commenced with the Methodists, but soon became general among all the sects in the region of country. Indeed, the whole district of country seemed affected by it, and great multitudes united themselves to the different religious parties. The great multitudes, converts, and this is what Wesley Walters tried to document, because they would advertise in the newspaper, so many people converted at this revival, that revival, because they were bragging in the Methodist magazine and Presbyterian publications. And he couldn't find these great multitudes until 1824-25 in Palmyra. So the apologists tried to focus on, it doesn't say multitudes were converted in Palmyra. It says, it talks about whole district of country, region of country, then great multitudes. So there's an ambiguity in the description. The problem is that the next paragraph, I was at this time in my 15th year, which is 1820. So he's saying the multitudes happened in 1820. So they go in the region of country to look for them. And then my father's family were proselyted Presbyterian faith. So we know Lucy was converted in 1824-25. So once you admit, this is what Quinn does. The first one to do it was Marvin Hill in a paper in the Mormon History Association. Gave a paper and he admitted that Lucy did join in the 1824-25 revival with Reverend Lane as the minister there. We know all these converts happened because Reverend Lane wrote about it in the Methodist magazine, in January of 1825. He's talking about all these conversions in Palmyra. So they admit that part of the passage is anachronistic, that Joseph Smith has moved this element of his mother's conversion and the three siblings to 1820 without notifying the reader that he jumped to this other revival.
Could Couldn't that just be explained away as a mistaken memory, though?
4 years,
David
4 or 5 years.
David Whitmer messed up on, where was it, Manchester? Was it Fayette?
That's 1 year.
Isn't that...
David,
couldn't he just... he's doing this in 1838. He just conflated the events. Isn't that a reasonable explanation?
Did he... Okay, so once you admit that he has a faulty memory on this in regard to Lucy's conversion, then why struggle to make the revival happen in Palmyra, or that Joseph Smith could have attended a revival somewhere in the region? Why struggle with that when you've already admitted that this part over here with Lucy could be a faulty memory, that no matter how it happened, it's anachronistic to this account? So you've already admitted that there's anachronisms.
Okay.
So why be so hard-nosed about the revival, unless you have some vendetta against Wesley Walters?
Well, that's kind of my question, because to me, and maybe it's just me, I don't care really whether it was 1820 or 1824, Joseph got the date wrong. What's the big deal, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay.
But, and so even Quinn admits, let's say Quinn admits that Joseph Smith brought it back and put it in 1820. I think there's a reason why Joseph Smith did this, though.
In 1820?
Yeah, why he moved this revival to here.
Okay, why?
Because he made the vision answer the question that happened in 1824. So once remember in 1832, he's only forgiven of his sins. Okay. He's not told, don't join any of the churches, right?
Right.
Don't join any of the churches, because we know that that he attends the Methodist Church. He doesn't join, but he attends the Methodist Church in Harmony, Pennsylvania, with Emma, his wife. But there's no commandment not to join any of the churches. They're all false. But it isn't until 1838, don't join. Because he's made this vision, he's changed this vision from a personal experience into one that's a founding event for the church. So he's using the revival to teach a lesson. Okay, and there's several lessons in the 1838 account. And one of them is, he's using the vision and the command not to join any of these churches. He's moving it back to this 1820 time, when the question of which church is true didn't come up until 1824-25. 1820, he's in harmony with his parents. All churches are wrong. Lucy in 1824 or 25, we don't know which, joins the Presbyterian Church, divides the family. Lucy's pressuring him to join. Join with the rest of the other three children. Join. And Joseph Smith says, I can go out in the woods and read my Bible and learn more than I could in a year of going to church. And in the 1838 account, he adds, in December 1842, this didn't get published the first time in the Times and Seasons, because it wasn't until December. He added two little things with Willard Richards as his scribe, saying he came home from the vision and leaned up against the mantelpiece and told his mother that he's learned that Presbyterianism isn't true. Now, that doesn't fit 1820. She hasn't joined the Presbyterian Church. She's not pressuring anybody yet. So how is it that he can lean up against the fireplace and say, oh, the vision has answered that? That's because he's changed this vision from a personal experience about salvation and forgiveness of sins into a foundational event for his church.
Let me ask another question then. And I don't know that anybody's ever advocated this. This is just me kind of spitballing here. But Could it be possible that and you do believe he had some sort of let's say he had this born-again experience in 1820, 21. Could he have had another vision in 1824 that said, don't join any churches? Is he conflating perhaps two visions rather than just one?
Yeah, if you dated the first vision to 1824, we have no problem.
Okay.
So, but he never claimed that. Another thing that should be mentioned is that the 1838 account, he's dictating in Missouri. And in Missouri, he's being persecuted and about to go to jail, actually, for 6 months, go to prison for 6 months. So he's enduring quite a lot of persecution. He's about to enter into. He's trying to get the Holy Land of Jackson County back. Mm-hmm. Actually, because
they've been kicked out in 1833, right?
He's in a way he's trying to appeal to the Missourians to leave them alone. In various ways, he does. But he has a campaign. He does he is still trying to get Zion back. But he said, I soon found, however, that my telling the story had excited a great deal of prejudice against me among professors of religion, and was the cause of great persecution which continued to increase. And though I was an obscure boy, only between 14 and 15 years of age, and my circumstances in life such to make a boy of no consequence in the world, yet men of high standing would take notice sufficient to excite the public mind against me, and create a bitter persecution. And this was common among all the sects, all united to persecute me. Now, this is pure fiction for 1820. But absolutely true in Missouri. Right? This is exactly what he's experiencing right then when he's dictating this. And his followers, and some of his followers, remember, he's just excommunicated all the leaders, David Whitmer, Oliver Cowdery, John Whitmer, all these W.W. Phelps, even. He's excommunicated them. They've turned against him, and all the religious leaders around are persecuting him and his followers. And he's trying to tell the story so his followers identify with his account. So
this is in 1835.
No, this is 1838 account.
Oh.
This is after he's had the vision that he keeps on going. This is the part that people don't read all that closely, I guess. But he keeps on going with the 1838. He's just saw Jesus, and Jesus has just told him not to join any of the churches, that their creeds are an abomination in his sight. Well, the harsh language in the vision is an attack on his persecutors in Missouri.
Okay, so are you saying that, because I know that he's complaining in the 1838 account that he told a minister about it and he's being persecuted. Are you saying that didn't happen? Is that what you're saying? That he's really just recreating a completely new thing to parallel what's happening in Missouri in 1838? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so, yeah, I did leave out the part where he talks about he was in the company of one of the participants in this revival, and they condemned his vision.
Right.
But if you read it really carefully, it doesn't sound like he told him about the first vision. I mean, Joseph Smith was participating probably in this 1824-25 revival, where he couldn't sing and shout with the rest of the family members. And they probably rejected him if he tried to talk about the treasure guardian and the gold plates and possible information on the gold plates that might have solved some religious issues, and he doesn't identify the participant, one of the leaders in this meeting. But the response was, well, God doesn't give revelations anymore. The Bible's all there is, basically. which would be a response to the gold plates, not to God appearing. Because we just talked about how Methodists and other revivalists and even ministers, when they have their conversion experiences, talk about similar visions. And the 1832 account, which is after that, supposedly, doesn't talk about, it says all the churches are false and that they, traditions of men and God, Jesus is going to come and destroy the ungodly and the wicked soon. But it doesn't talk about anything a revivalist would have a problem with, really. So I think the story, even though he's talking about rejecting his vision, this minister, this person, which could be anybody, not really a minister, because it could be a lay minister like Willard Richards. Because Willard Richards in the 1830 census, I believe it is, says that he's a Methodist clergy, or, minister. So he could have been a lay Methodist minister. But they're rejecting his, probably the story of the guardian angel or guardian spirit, treasure guardian over the plates, telling that story, and that the plates started having a religious connotation, and they rejected that because there's no more revelations. The Bible is all there is. So forget about that story of your book, and I don't care what answers are in that book, because the Bible's, that's all there is. That's the only revelation. They wouldn't have condemned the first vision. There was nothing to condemn in it.
Okay.
So one more part here is how he's using this story with his present audience as proof of his mission. It seemed as though the adversary was aware at a very early period of my life that I was destined to prove a disturber and an annoyer of his kingdom. Else, why should the powers of darkness combine against me? Why the opposition and persecution that arose against me almost in my infancy? Well, this is pure fiction when you talk about it from the standpoint of 1820. But a message he wants to tell his followers. The more they persecute me, the more, that's because I'm telling the truth. It's the devil. They're of the devil, and they're trying to persecute me. Then he goes on to say, I have actually seen a vision, and who am I that I can withstand God, or why does the world think to make me deny what I've actually seen? For I have seen a vision, I knew it, and I knew God knew it, and I could not deny it. Neither dare I do it. At least I knew that by so doing I would offend God and come under condemnation. That's the apostates. That's the people that did deny the Mormonism and have left him. And he's telling them, don't deny the faith. Don't come under God's condemnation and deny and leave me.
So let me ask you this question, because I remember Richard Bushman in an interview several years ago said one of the things that he struggled with was he couldn't understand why, for some people, when you look at the first vision narratives, it was so, look at all these conflicts. This proves Mormonism isn't true. But for other people, and I guess this is where I would probably fit in, these don't really matter. Like, I can see Joseph, maybe he did well, and I also know that Richard Bushman, I believe in his book Rough Stone Rolling, said something to the effect of Joseph didn't always tell everything, that he kept a lot of things to himself for times, and he would tell a piece to this audience, say in 1832, and then he would tell another piece in 1838 that that the vision may relate to their current circumstances, this persecution that you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, and so for some people, these first vision conflicts are a big deal, and they prove Mormonism isn't true. And for other people, it's like, what's the big deal? Why is this an issue? So I guess my question is, where do you fit in there? I mean, in my mind, would it be inconsistent? And I'm a believer, to say, well, maybe he had something in 1820 or 1821. Maybe it was a born-again experience. Maybe he didn't tell everything in that 1832 account, and then when 1838 he's having these persecutions, maybe he's misremembering some things and going to 1824. And to me, it's not a testimony killer. I'll put it that way. So, number one, where do you fit among those two groups?
Okay, so my goal is not to kill people's testimony. Okay, I'm just a historian. And this is how to look at the documents in a historically minded way.
Okay.
Historians look for these kinds of things to show development. Now, so some of the details you could write off as memory problems. But you can't use faulty memory like Stephen Harper does as an apologetic to explain away contradictions. You might use faulty memory, like there's false memory syndrome, where you can actually people can actually create false memories, trying to remember vague memories. And it works. I mean, an example would be the Spalding witnesses. They have vague memories about a manuscript in the past. Well, we know that what they remembered was wrong. I mean, because they could only remember what they had read in the Book of Mormon and nothing else. And we know that the Book of Mormon is not about the lost 10 tribes. That was a common misconception, but these witnesses, that's got into their memory somehow. And it's a vague story. They vaguely remember the names. The memories become sharper the more they talk to each other. So we know from other methods that they were wrong. Okay? But we don't use false memory syndrome to prove that they're wrong. We use that as an explanation of how they got it wrong. Okay? So you can't come up on Joseph Smith and say, well, there's these contradictions, and they could all be explained away by this false memory syndrome theory. Or else you can never catch anyone making things up or prevaricating on whatever issue. They could always say it's memory, and a lot of politicians try that. But it's not what historians do. It's what apologists do.
Okay,
so I wouldn't say, I'm not trying to kill people's memory or testimonies. That's not in my concern. I don't care about that question. Okay, it's not that I don't care about your religion or anything. I don't care about destroying people's faith or anything. I'm just trying to get the close to what probably really happened as I can. That doesn't mean that some people of faith can hang on to that faith, but it has to maybe evolve a little bit. You know, I'm just trying to find the facts and what probably the best evidence, the best scenario to explain the evidence. It's not my job to figure out how people of faith are what to do with this. I could just point out the problem, not the answer maybe, you know. So I think there is a way to hang on as long as you want. But
so you wouldn't be
and
opposed,
people in different ways. It's a very personal thing.
So you wouldn't be opposed to somebody that says, yeah, I think Joseph conflated maybe one or two visions here, conflated 1820 with 1824, and it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, there's some contradictions there, but it's you know, it's a faulty memory, big deal.
Well, I think he changed it on purpose to teach a lesson. He's more concerned. He's a charismatic leader. Mm-hmm. He's not a historian. He can care less about history, facts, keeping the revelations pure as they were originally given. He doesn't care about any of that. He is trying to get things done, motivate people to do things that they wouldn't do without this motivation. And
so your opinion, which may be different than a faithful person's opinion,
it
is. Okay, so you think he had a born-again experience, 18, 20, 21, and then he embellished this first vision story as time went on in order to prove some, say, spiritual truths or authority claims or things like that. That's kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, it's useful fiction, as you might call it, but it really happened. It really changed his life. The original born-again experience was real to him, in my mind. Real. It changed his life. It made him do things that... I see Joe Smith as a religious zealot, not some atheist guy that is out to con people, get money, and manipulate people. And I believe he is a narcissist, like just about any leader in any area of life, almost. I believe he does have, I wouldn't say he has narcissistic personality disorder, though. I don't think it's necessary to diagnose him with a disorder. I'm just saying he has narcissistic traits.
Okay.
And which charismatic leaders do. Mm-hmm. And it's part of what drew people to him. And what made him not doubt himself and think that he had limitations. I mean, that whole idea of he's going to found a Zion, in the wilderness, and it's going to become a large city and take over the world, is a pretty narcissistic endeavor. So he wouldn't have tried such a thing, and he failed, of course, miserably failed with the establishing Zion, because narcissists overestimate their abilities, and he did. So, so he has those traits. I kind of lost my train.
All right. Well, I think we've hit the first vision enough of that.
Yeah.
I think. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with historian Dan Vogel. In our next conversation, we're going to move on to another topic, the Book of Abraham. Dan will tell us about the mummies and papyrus brought by Michael Chandler to Kirtland, Ohio. What was on them?
One Horus scroll, Book of Breathings. He has one on the oldest female. There's a scroll, Ta Sheret Min, Book of the Dead, which is what we identify later as the record of ancient Joseph, which is the one that has all the nice little pictures and stuff, and drawings of things that Oliver Cowdery describes, like the Pillar of Enoch and, 3-in-1 God and stuff like that.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt, so check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.